Welcome to the 2022 Lifesavers Rally. Welcome to the new schools attending today, and welcome back to the schools who have embraced the Lifesavers Rally as a tradition. I would like to thank the sponsors and community partners for their generous support of the Lifesavers Rally, as well as the 20 volunteers who are donating their time, as well as the Gift of Life team who make this event successful. Thank you to Rockhurst High School for hosting the Lifesavers Rally today. We will break for lunch at approximately 11 a.m., and after lunch, we will convene in the auditorium and conclude with our final speaker. At this time, I ask that everyone please silence your phones. Today, you will hear the passion of a transplant surgeon, Dr. Matt Wilkinson, as he explains his educational journey and what it is like to hold life in his hands. Allie will share why she donated a kidney and how she became part of a living donor chain. Andrew will explain the feeling of receiving a heart transplant after waiting weeks in the hospital. And Michele will embrace the memory of her 11-year-old daughter, Blair, and the story of how Blair became an organ donor. When I was in middle school, I was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, a type of blood cancer. I received 2 cord blood transplants, and I went on to graduate high school with honors, completed my undergrad degree at Rockhurst University, and have since completed my master's in education in New York City. I now work at UMKC in the School of Education and the Institute for Urban Education. I am alive today because families were willing to donate the cord blood from the umbilical cord after their babies were born. Because this blood is so rich in nutrients, it was strong enough to save my life. And I have been in remission from cancer for 10 years. Thank you. Today you will be educated about organ, eye, and tissue donation, and you will be inspired by stories of triumph and stories of loss. And you will be encouraged to have the talk about donation with a loved one, because the conversation matters. Our first speaker is Dr. Matt Wilkinson. Dr. Wilkinson accepted a position at St. Luke's as a transplant surgeon and moved to Kansas City in December of 2019. He has received several awards while at St. Luke's for his excellence in teaching. Dr. Wilkinson has a passion for transplant and has spoken many times about the respect he has for organ donors and their families. When operating on an organ donor or an organ recipient, Dr. Wilkinson makes a special time with the entire staff of the operating room, showing appreciation and acknowledgement of the life of the donor and special gift that will be received by the recipient. When he isn't working, he enjoys traveling with his husband Marco, taking care of his saltwater fish tank, and playing with his cats, Tiger, Luna, and Gigi. After Dr. Wilkinson concludes his remarks, there will be time for a few questions. Please welcome Dr. Matt Wilkinson.
All right, good morning. It's nice to see you all out here this morning and to get a chance to talk to you. We can go ahead to the next slide. So after that introduction, it takes a long time to get to the point where I am, but I remember being in high school a while back. I spent about as much time getting through high school as I did with my training. So I will be 40 in January, which is not a number I'm looking forward to, but we're getting there slowly. So I was born in Colorado and lived there for a few years and then moved up to Connecticut. My dad worked for the government, and so we moved around quite a bit. But I did my undergraduate work in South Carolina. I went to the University of South Carolina for my undergrad, and so that was my first 4 years. So you have to get a bachelor's degree. So after you finish high school, you end up doing 4 years to get a bachelor's degree, and then you can go to medical school. After I finished that, I moved to Texas to start medical school. So medical school is normally another 4 years, but I decided that that wasn't enough, so I decided to do an MD and a PhD, which is 2 different doctoral degrees, so that was 7 years total. I ended up going from Texas and finishing in New York, and I was in Manhattan at the time. Once you finish medical school, you can pick any specialty you want. So medical school, you spend a lot of time trying different things. Do you want to be a medicine doctor? Do you want to be a surgeon? Do you want to be a family practice person? Do you want to work in inpatient? Do you want to work in outpatient? Coming out of medical school, you end up making that choice and doing something called residency. Residency is where you do the specialty that you're going to do in the long term, whatever you have chosen to do as a practice. How long your residency is depends on what you've chosen to do. The shortest residencies are about 3 years. The longest are as long as 7 years for things like neurosurgery. General surgery, which is what I did, which primarily is surgery of the abdominal cavity, so below your breathing muscle, the diaphragm, is 5 years. So I spent another 5 years in New York and did that, and then you do a transplant fellowship. So a fellowship is like extra training on top of it if you want to specialize. So after general surgery, you can do things like transplant surgery, which is what I did. That's another 2 years. You can do things like plastic surgery, which is another 3 years. You can do things like vascular surgery or working on blood vessels, which is another 1 or 2 years. So I went to the University of Pennsylvania, and I was there for another 2 years. So all in all, if you add that up, I spent 18 years after I graduated from high school in education. So I was 36 when I finished everything. And then I came out to St. Luke's, which is where I've been since December of 2019. Now, as you may remember, in December of 2019, we were just starting to first hear about this virus that was in China, and no one knew really what was going on with it and things like that. So I moved here and thought, well, this will be a fun place to go and learn about and spend a lot of time out in the community and things like that. And then in March of 2020, as you know, everything sort of shut down. So it was sort of an interesting welcome to Kansas City, and COVID actually changed a lot of what we did in transplant and things like that, because whether or not you realize it, a lot of surgeries that we do are what we call elective, meaning that you go see a surgeon in the office, you talk to them about the surgery. So like a hip replacement, a knee replacement, a plastic surgery, things like that. Those are considered elective surgeries. You're making a choice to do it, you book a date for surgery. Almost all surgeries shut down, and not just here, but across the country when COVID started. Were people still dying during that time? Yes, which means the organs were still available, which means we were some of the only surgeons operating during that time because there were still organs available for transplant. And so it was an interesting sort of time period because we were probably the only surgeons, us and the trauma surgeons, because people were still getting hurt, so we still were working. Next slide. How many people do you think are waiting for an organ transplant? And this is all organs. So you saw the slides at the beginning when you were sitting here. How many people do you think are waiting for an organ transplant in this country? Just this country. 50,000? It's a good guess, but it's more. 1 million would be a lot, but it'd be good for me for work. It's about 100,000. There's about 100,000 people waiting for an organ transplant. Now that's across all organs. So remember, you can transplant all sorts of things. So hearts and lungs, and that's not the kind of transplant I do. That's a completely separate training path because this is called the thoracic cavity, what's in the chest. In the abdomen, you can transplant the liver, the kidneys, and the pancreas. And so that's the training path that I went through. But remember, you can also do things like Kori talked about. You can get stem cell transplants. You can get corneal transplants. You can get skin grafts. There's lots of other things that can be transplanted. So this number takes into account all of that. Now, do we have enough organs for everybody that wants to be transplanted? No. I live about 5 blocks from here. I drive by Target a lot of times on the way home. If I could just go by Target and pick up a kidney or a liver, my job would be much easier because most of the time these organs come at 2 in the morning. So I don't tend to operate at regular hours. The organs come when they come. So you have to do the transplant then. So if we go to the next slide, how many people die each day waiting for a transplant? Because if you're on the list, that doesn't guarantee you will get a transplant. You may die before you're transplanted. Take a guess. It's less than 100. 50, still less. It's about 20, 17 to 20 die each day. Now that number varies, okay, because we are trying to put more people on the list, but you got to remember, this is every single day. Someone every single day is dying because they're unable to get a transplant. Which organs do we have an ability to replace? Like which organs do we have the ability to help out with or to do something until that someone can get a transplant? Kidneys, right? So what is someone who doesn't have, If someone has kidney disease and they can't use their own kidneys, what do they have to go on? Dialysis. Dialysis is not good. You do not want to be on dialysis. If you take every single person in this country that starts dialysis this year, so all comers, how many of them will be alive in 5 years as a percentage? Higher than 25, but 50%. If you have to start dialysis this year, there is a 50% chance you'll be dead in 5 years. Dialysis works, and it's what we have to do if you don't have a kidney, but it's not a good long-term solution. There is no thing like dialysis for liver. If your liver fails, there's really not much we can do about it other than transplant you. There are things that can be done in heart and lung, but they're more short-term things. They're not really long-term things that someone can live with for a long term. Next slide. The organs that people are waiting for, and this is what we started to talk about. Most people are waiting for kidneys. If someone is waiting, most of the time it is for a kidney transplant. So you have over 90,000 people waiting and 24,000 transplants performed per year. So that's a lot. I mean, we're doing a lot of transplants. It's not for lack of doing them, but every year more people need to go on dialysis. More people want to go on the transplant list, and the government has pushed to get more people transplanted, to get more people to be organ donors. So we are trying to do more and more. The numbers come down after that because as you get to more vital organs, again, things we don't have replacements for, sometimes it gets more and more difficult to find a good candidate and a good organ to transplant someone with. Next slide. So when we're in the operating room, and I didn't want to show you guys anything too graphic, but what you can see there is this is me on the left, and this is one of my surgical mentors when I was in fellowship, and you see those glasses we're wearing there? You see those little black things on the end of them? Those are telescopes, actually, because everything we're working on is the size of millimeters. You have to hook back up all the blood vessels, and in a kidney, you have to hook the kidney back up to the bladder, because otherwise where are the urine going to go? In a liver, you've got to hook back up the bile duct to the intestine because your liver makes bile, which if you've ever thrown up, that's that greenish stuff that comes up, that's made by the liver. And so you have to hook that back up. So those little glasses we wear magnify things about 2.5 to 3.5 times. So everything we're seeing is much, much larger when we look like that. A kidney transplant takes anywhere from 3 to 6 hours. A liver transplant probably takes between 4 and 8 hours. And again, unfortunately, this is not elective surgery. So I'm not seeing someone in the office and saying, we'll do your kidney transplant next week at 7:45, unless you have a living donor. You can donate your organs. You can donate one of your kidneys. You have 2. You only need 1 to live. So if you're a healthy person, you can actually donate one of your kidneys to someone who needs it. And the benefit of that is that person doesn't have to wait on the list because you're giving it directly to them. You can actually even donate a piece of your liver. So in a normal healthy person, you can take out 70% of the liver and that person will be just fine, and your liver is your only organ that regenerates. The liver will actually grow back to the size that it was, and not only that, the liver and the recipient will grow to the size that they need. So you can actually donate a piece of your liver as well. Next slide. So when we do a kidney transplant, this is the basic setup for a kidney transplant. You're looking at a picture of someone as they're standing up. That big red tube in the middle is called the aorta. That's the biggest blood vessel in your body, comes out of your heart. Your heart pumps about 6 liters a minute, depending on your size. That's about 1.5 gallons. That big blue tube is what carries things back to the heart. So that's the aorta and vena cava. What I tell my patients is that's like I-35 north and south. Everything in the body comes off of those, okay? Your kidneys are way up here in your back. If you feel by your bottom rib, that's where your kidneys are, right by the 12th rib, which is your bottom rib, and they sit there. We do not take those out when we do a transplant. We don't even put the kidney in the same place. The kidneys are not working, and so the person has to be on dialysis, but we don't take those kidneys out because they're not causing problems. We actually put the new kidney down in the lower abdomen. You can do it on the right, you can do it on the left. This diagram is on the left, and we plug it into the side of the blood vessels going into the leg. And that basically allows the blood to go into the kidney, some of the blood to go into the leg, and then we hook the ureter, which is the tube that carries the urine from the kidney to the bladder, back up into the bladder. And that makes sure that all the urine is coming out the same way. On the left there, you see an actual kidney. So that kidney right there, that is an actual kidney. A kidney weighs about 1 pound. They each weigh about 1 pound. And they're usually about 12 centimeters, so not really big. I mean, you could fit one in your hand. okay? You have 2 of them, so 2 pounds total. That tube coming off the bottom, that is the ureter tube, and then the blood vessels are held away over there to the left. And this is a kidney before I implanted it in someone. So the blood is not in it, so it almost looks like kind of piece of raw chicken breast, and that's what they look like. As soon as you put the blood into it, it turns bright pink because the blood is back inside of it. Your kidneys, even though they only weigh 2 pounds out of your whole body, so think of your weight, and your kidneys weigh about 2 pounds, they get 20% of the blood supply every minute. That's how important they are to getting the blood filtered and things like that. So even though these 2 tiny organs, they get 20% of the blood supply. There's only one organ that gets more than that. One organ gets 25%, no matter what you're doing. What organ might that be? The brain. The brain only weighs 3 pounds. So you have these 3 organs, 2 kidneys and a brain that weigh 5 pounds altogether, and they get 45% of the blood your heart puts out every minute, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Next slide. So the liver. The liver's a little different. What I tell my patients, I say the liver's like a big triangle. So it's just like this. It goes up from here, it goes across, and it comes back down. It's bigger on the right than it is on the left. And the liver is your biggest internal organ. But it's not the biggest organ in your body. What's the biggest organ in your body? The skin, exactly. Good. Okay, so the skin is your biggest organ. So the liver is your biggest internal organ. And because of how big it is, you can't actually put a new liver in without taking the old one out. So it's almost like changing an engine block. So when you do a liver transplant, unlike a kidney transplant, you actually have to get that old liver out first, okay? Now, you remember that big blue tube there that I told you about, like I-35 north and south, that vena cava? The liver sits right on top of it. In fact, the liver drains into it. So in order to do a liver transplant, you have to cut that big tube where you have liters of blood going through a minute. So you end up having to put big clamps on it and things like that. The incision for a liver transplant is like this. Underneath both ribs, big incision. Sometimes it comes all the way up to the ribs, and then the patients feel real happy because they have a Mercedes-Benz symbol on their abdomen. So we plug that liver back in. There's different ways that you can do it, but the big point is that you have to take the old one out first. So it's a little different from a kidney transplant. The word for that in medicine is that it's orthotopic. It's going to go in the same place, as opposed to a kidney transplant, which is heterotopic. It's going in a different place. So what would hearts be, knowing those words? Since hearts go in the same place, it's considered what kind of a transplant? Orthotopic, right? Lungs are the same way. The only 2 organs that we generally transplant heterotopically are kidneys, which you saw on the last slide, and then if you transplant a pancreas. You don't take the old pancreas out. The new pancreas generally goes in the same place that a kidney transplant would. And a lot of people actually get a kidney and a pancreas because diabetes is one of the #1 causes of kidney failure. The 2 most common causes of kidney failure in this country are hypertension and diabetes for all comers. For young people, it tends to be genetic diseases, anatomic problems, things like that. But most people that are getting transplanted are adults, and it's because of long-standing diabetes or hypertension. Next slide. That's what a liver looks like when it's outside the body. Right now you see it there, and it's kind of pinkish. This is a liver that was taken out, and you can see this is the right side, that's the left side, this is the front. So you don't see all the stuff underneath where it is attached. When you normally take the liver out of a donor, it's going to actually be kind of brownish because all the blood's going to be flushed out of it, kind of like the kidney is. It's a little darker brown. And then when the blood's in it, this is a normal color for a liver when it has blood in it and it's perfused, so when it's in the normal body. Okay, next slide. So what are new things we're doing in transplant? Transplant is probably one of the youngest fields in surgery and one of the youngest fields in medicine. The first successful transplants really weren't done. Technically, they started in dogs around the turn of the 20th century. So in the early 1900s, they did transplants in dogs and proved that you could do it. You could make these vascular connections. But transplant was really held up because if you take an organ out of one person and you put it into someone else, even if you do a perfect job, that person's immune system is going to say this doesn't belong here and choose to attack it. Okay, the immune system is very, very smart. And on every single cell in your body, you have little things pointing out from them and saying, this is who I am, this belongs to me. And that kidney is not going to have that. It's going to have whoever it came from in the donor. And so your immune system would attack that. And it wasn't until the 70s that we got the kind of medications that can actually calm the immune system down enough to allow the transplant to stay in place. Getting a transplant means you're on medication every day for the rest of your life. okay? And how many you're on depends on the type of transplant you get. But rejection, or your body attacking that organ, is an important part of what we have to explain to patients before they get a transplant. Some new things in transplant: engineering organs. If we could grow them, we wouldn't have to wait, right? We'd be able to basically just go down to Target or Walmart, wherever you want to go, and grow your kidney or grow your liver and say, okay, we're going to transplant you in 6 months. It would make my life much easier, and I wouldn't have to transplant in the middle of the night. Most organs, when they're taken out, they're put on ice. So we just flush the blood out, put them on ice, take them to the new place and plug them in. So part of it, this big machine here, is actually to keep the blood flowing through the organ after it's taken out of the body. The liver actually sits in that little box there that you see on the right side, and it keeps blood pumping through it until it's put in the new person. And then you may have seen in the news this year this idea of xenotransplantation, which basically means you're getting a transplant from someone who's not something that's not human. So from a monkey, from a pig. In fact, pigs are actually probably the closest to humans in terms of the way the heart works. And different animal models are used based on the organ you're looking at. But you probably saw earlier this year there was a xenotransplant that was done in this country, and the patient lived for 59 days. They weren't going to otherwise get a transplant. But again, if there was an ability to get more organs, we could do more transplants. Next slide. So I think that's the last slide for me. I do have time for a few questions. I think the most important thing is whatever you choose to do, you don't have to be a transplant surgeon. We have lots of them, and we could certainly use more, but be passionate about what you're going to do. And then lastly, the only reason all of this works is because we have organ donors. The ability to do transplants is entirely dependent on being an organ donor. So having that discussion with yourself, making that decision for yourself. Missouri and Kansas are actually two of the best states in terms of having organ donation rates, because we talk to people when they're in high school when they start to make decisions for themselves. And most people are actually what's called first person designated, meaning it says on your license, you have a little heart there with a Y on it and things like that. And it says that you have chosen to be an organ donor, and that's your own choice. So if something were to happen that you could make those decisions, those wishes will be respected, that you can be an organ donor. And if not, it's important to talk to your family. Is that something that you would find important? And never rule yourself out, because again, there's lots of organs that can be used, even if you have some medical diseases, things like that. Never ever decide for yourself. Let the people who do these things make that decision, because there's almost always something that you can use to benefit someone else. Okay? Thank you guys for your attention. I'm happy to take any questions that you have. Yes. Do I like being a doctor? Yes, I do. It is a long road. I will tell you this. I worked for Kaplan Test Prep for a long time. I wrote most of their curriculum for the MCAT and things like that, which is a test you take to go to medical school. You have to love what you do. And no matter what you do, because in everything you do, there's going to be positives and negatives. But I would say the most rewarding part of my job is getting to see patients every day. I don't like writing notes particularly. I don't like sitting at my desk particularly. I like the fact that the people that I see, I can help them. I do like being a physician. If I were to do it again, I would do the same thing.
Got a question right over here.
Do you get paid for being an organ donor?
Do you get paid for being an organ donor? No. If you're deceased, then there wouldn't be any reason for that. If you are a living donor, all the costs, so like let's say that you came and you said, I want to donate my kidney to somebody, all of the costs to you would be covered by the recipient's insurance. You would have zero out of pocket, and actually in some cases there are some programs to provide you with stipends for time you can't work and things like that as you're recovering. Yeah, so if you want to be a living donor, that is taken care of, and there's no cost out of your pocket if you chose to donate, something to someone else.
We have one right here.
Okay.
Was there ever a moment that made you question what you were doing, or question if this was a career for you?
Was there ever a moment that made me question what I was doing in terms of just organ transplant, or just this road, or?
Organ transplant.
Probably not transplant. I think of all the fields in surgery, transplant is like the most fascinating. You actually have to know a pretty good amount of medicine. You have to understand immunology, or how the immune system works. You have to understand medical disease. But what I would say about that is, if you go through something for 18 years and don't question whether you're doing the right thing, you probably aren't thinking about it hard enough. I would still do the same thing, but there were definitely days where I was like, I'm done with this. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to get out of school. It is a long time to go to school like this. I went straight through. I applaud people that come out of school, work, and go back, because I think that'd be harder. I think if I had gone into work after my undergrad, after my first 4 years, I don't know that I would have been able to go back to medical school or things like that, or been motivated to, because once you get a job and you get out there, your life priorities change a little bit.
So you mentioned like how you have to do surgery in like the middle of the night sometimes. Is it like really hard to like wake yourself up so you don't like make mistakes and stuff?
So that's an important question. And so what that involves is being aware of how tired you are and things like that. So certainly some organs can sit for longer. So like a heart, probably only 4 hours out of the body. So you kind of have to do it right away. A kidney, depending on how good it is. You know, we had a donor the other day, this 20-year-old had died of a head trauma. That kidney could probably go 48 hours and it would still probably work. The time is based on that. And so part of the way you make those decisions is, you know, how tired do you feel before you start? If you know you're going to have a case, you know you have a donor coming, you may try to get some sleep at different times. I will say that that's what your training, you know, prepares you for and things like that, because it's very hit or miss. Like I could be on call and do no transplants for a whole week, and then I remember in July on the 31st I had to do 3 kidneys in a row. So from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. I was doing kidney transplants. And so the thing I like about surgery, I would say, is when you're in surgery, that's all you're focused on. You're in that operating and your only responsibility is to that patient. So you really do get honed in. Now that being said, you saw that picture when I was in fellowship. There were times after I'd done 3 liver transplants, I'd be sitting at the chair in the room after the case is over and the nurses are getting ready to move the patient, and I fell asleep sitting up. And they just said, just let him sleep, it'll be fine. So you do have to be aware of that though. I mean, it is part of it. And we have a system where we have a backup surgeon, that there's another surgeon who's available if you were to be too tired or be unable to do the transplant, because the patient's safety is priority.
What would you do if like the patient that was getting the transplant like started to arrest? Like say they were getting a heart transplant and their heart started giving out like before the transplant like happened, what happens with the patient?
So if there is a case where the recipient becomes too sick all of a sudden, so basically what you're saying, which can happen, let's say that I'm at a hospital and I'm taking out a liver, a kidney, and things like that, and the heart team says our recipient is now too sick. They will try to reallocate that organ or go to the next person on the list. So a lot of times with like liver, they'll tell me, oh, you know, KU has the first liver candidate, but if they fall out, you're the next patient. Do you have someone who you would want to do that? Okay, is that it? Or I have time for one? You tell me. I'm happy to do whatever.
We'll have one more.
One more, okay.
What's the longest time you've been in surgery for?
Continuous time, probably about 30 hours. Not a single surgery, but like in total time between things, about 30 hours. So. All right, well, I'll be around for a little while at the break. You guys can ask me some questions and things like that if you haven't, but I thank you for your attention, and again, please be an organ donor.
Our next speaker is Shappell. Allie is an intensive care unit nurse at Research Medical Center. She always had a desire to donate one of her kidneys. She will explain what a living donor chain is and why she is certain she made the right decision. Allie's remarks will begin with a short video of her meeting her kidney recipient for the first time.
Hi, Leonard. This is your, where's she at? Here she is. Donor Allie.
Oh. Now you're gonna make me cry. I'm gonna cry now. I couldn't believe that I got the one. So lucky, you're blessed. Nothing so sweet. You just have no idea.
I know, like, what is going on?
You're so young.
You know what? She's young, but she is mature.
My niece was going to be my donor. Really? She's 36. You made all the difference. Oh. And I'm an old codger. God, you're so young.
Well, he told me he was hoping he was going to get an old kidney and that Brandy was going to get her kidney to a young person.
Hopefully it'll last until
It'll last forever.
Exactly.
Hello, good morning everyone. My name is Shappell, and as you can see I was a living kidney donor almost 3 years ago. This was something I had wanted to do since high school. I'm sure you guys have never heard of this, but the movie Steel Magnolias, I was in the play. I played Shelby, and she was a young mother who was in kidney failure. And so through that I got to kind of learn what kidney failure looked like and that it was kind of a crappy deal for the people who were involved in it. And through this character, I learned the truth about kidney failure and what it looks like. And as he spoke about dialysis, I'm also a nurse, so I get to kind of see both sides of it. Dialysis, typically for a patient who is just in typical renal failure, they go about 3 times a week, normally Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for a couple of hours, and it's very draining. For the patients that I get to be with while they're going through it, it's very hard on their body. They're very tired, they're very nauseous, it's just uncomfortable for them. While dialysis can be a life-saving procedure, it's not easy. Not only does it take several hours, several times a week, many people become nauseous, lightheaded, and some even do faint. Since I was inspired to help people like Shelby, I made the decision that I wanted to donate one of my kidneys because I knew that I could live a normal, healthy life with only one. So I'm considered a living donor. I researched the testing and eventually found a friend of a friend who just so happened to be in renal failure. And I went to the hospital and decided to just get tested. It ended up being about an 8-hour day. They took like a 24-hour urine sample, 30 different vials of blood, which I don't even think I had in my body. There were 5 different doctors that I had to talk to. I had to meet with a psychiatrist to make sure that I knew what I was doing and I understood. Let's see. The truth is that donating an organ while you're still alive is offering to have major surgery that you don't need to have. Most people only consider major surgery when they've already exhausted every other option. So to decide to just give someone another organ, they take pretty seriously. The first surgeon that I talked to, the first thing he said to me was, "My job is to talk you out of this." He was like, "I'm going to be completely honest, this is going to be hard for you. You're going to watch the donor get better every day. He's going to be skipping around feeling better, and you're going to be laying in bed kind of feeling like crap for a couple days." It turns out that I wasn't a match for the man that I planned to donate the kidney to. However, that's not super unusual. Most of us aren't. So there's a program called a donation chain. So through the program, a team of professionals pulls together many different pairs of unmatched living donors and prospective kidney recipients that match one another. So we've all seen Friends. Think of it like Ross wants to donate his kidney to Chandler, but he's not a match. Next door, Rachel wants to donate her kidney to Phoebe, but they're not a match. But if Ross and Phoebe are a match, then Rachel and Chandler are a match. They can just kind of swap them, like a trade. In our case, there were actually 4 donors and 4 recipients, so it was quite the ordeal. On the day of surgery, we got to the hospital early in the morning. I was understandably nervous, but mostly excited. One weird part of the surgery, not for me as the donor, but for the recipient, is that they don't remove the old kidneys, like he said. If they're not causing any problems, they just kind of leave them there and tack one on at the bottom. They'd reroute the blood supply and then get it all hooked up and working. When I woke up from surgery, I felt sore, fair. Just kind of like I had had like a really intense ab workout. Granted, I was still under quite a bit of pain medication. But every time I laughed, I coughed, hiccuped, sneezed, it was excruciating. It was very, very painful. And even learning how, because they cut you kind of just right down in the middle, and it was laparoscopic, so very, very small incisions, but you feel very tight, like you have to learn how to stretch that back out again. Over the next few days, I worked with physical therapy to learn how to stand up and walk like a normal person. On the day I was scheduled to leave the hospital, I begged and pleaded to meet my recipient. And finally, after casework and everyone signing the papers, all 8 of us were able to get together and meet each other, and you saw the video. When I walked into my recipient's room with a crowd of people anxiously awaiting, I laid my eyes on a little gentleman with the voice of Winnie the Pooh. He hobbled over to me and, without missing a beat, gave me the biggest hug and teared up right on cue. His wife behind me expressed her endless gratitude, of course, while taking pictures, as you saw. Everyone in the room and those watching had tears in their eyes. I can honestly say that Jim, my recipient, is one of the most genuine and kind-hearted people I've ever met. A few weeks after donating, I found out that Jim was the grandfather of one of my friends from high school that I didn't even know. Recovery was unique, to say the least. The first few days, they have you on pretty intense pain medication, which for someone like me, I just went straight to sleep. So I slept for the first 2 days. The hardest part for me was feeling like myself, like I was feeling okay, but I couldn't do everything that I used to do. Like I would get so worn out just by taking a shower. That was just exhausting to me. I couldn't work or drive because of the medication for about 2 weeks. Luckily, I really didn't struggle with very much pain. I do think a part of that is my age. I've heard that the older you are when you have surgeries, it's a little bit harder to recover. I'm young, I'm spry, so it was a little bit easier for me. I was able to get off the medications pretty quickly. I was very young and spry, so I bounced back pretty quickly. As for my scars, they're very minimal. The procedure was done laparoscopically, which basically means they take little robot arms and they put a little bitty incision and then they kind of blow your stomach up like a balloon so they can look in there, and then they use the little arms to kind of go around and fix everything. So I really only have a little 2-inch scar here and then a couple little nicks. This means they don't have to completely open you up like they did before. Before, when you had a kidney transplant, it was a full, big scar, big procedure, and I have very, very small ones. I even have a tattoo on my ribs, and they told me in the consultation that they were going to have to cut through it. And when I woke up, the surgeon came in and he goes, "Did you see what I did?" And he had purposely moved it lower and put his little initials next to it. I have a very unique perspective on organ donation, not only because I was a donor, but I am also a critical care nurse at Research Medical Center. So I work in the ICU. I've seen all sides of the transplant story. Most of the people who go into renal failure didn't cause it themselves. For instance, the man who I donated to, he was just born with scar tissue on his kidneys. It was something he was born with, and eventually the kidneys were just too tired to keep working on their own. Many of the patients I care for, they had some other medical condition, and then, it kind of becomes this snowball effect, and the kidneys take a hit from that. So a lot of my patients, we do CRRT, which is continued renal replacement therapy, which is just continuous 24/7 dialysis. So it's a little rough for them. Now that I have donated a kidney, the big question on everyone's mind is, well, what happens if mine fails? If that ever happens, God forbid, I would be immediately placed to the top of the waiting list. I would not be on the long waiting list because I had 2 kidneys. I was born with 2 and chose to give one up. So I would immediately get one. It wouldn't be, obviously I would have to take care of it, but I take better care of myself than I ever have. Let's see. Being a living kidney donor has impacted my life in many positive ways. I take much better care of myself. I'm more active. I drink more water. Take it easy on the salt and the pop and the alcohol. I'm still allowed to have these things, just in moderation. And I go to yearly checkups to get my labs drawn. They take a little pee sample, make sure that everything's still working as it should. I've met some of the most incredible people and spoke at several conferences and presentations about living donation. I've shared my story with a handful of people who are considering organ donation or who became living donors. I don't feel any different, to tell you the truth. If I didn't have a picture of my kidney in the surgeon's hand, I don't know that I'd believe it. But being an organ donor will be something that I will always hold very close to my heart. There's a piece of me that is quite literally giving life to somebody else. No matter what I do with my life now, I know that I helped someone, even if it's just the one. I would give anything to go back and relive that day, as weird as it sounds. I had never felt like that before. Even though I was scared and worried what the future holds, I was proud of myself. And every single person in my family tried to talk me out of it. Every single person. They were very scared. You know, you're going through this intense surgery, you're literally giving up an organ, and they didn't want me to go through it. But after they've got to see the full picture, they're much more supportive now. And an interesting piece of it is, since I am a nurse, and I also have donated, my patients can't know. They cannot know that I've donated, they cannot know that I'm an advocate for it, because my job is not to sway them to donate. My job is to keep them alive. So that has to be a separation in my life. After seeing the experience play out and the joy it brought every family involved, their attitude changed. They saw what I saw from the beginning, an opportunity to give somebody a second chance. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Andrew Widman. When Andrew was born, his heart was backwards. He will explain what it was like to grow up with a special heart and then what it was like to receive a life-saving heart transplant. We will begin with a short video. This is Andrew while he was waiting in the hospital for a new heart, and when he was informed that a heart had become available to save his life. After Andrew concludes his remarks, there will be some time for questions. Please begin the video.
Do you have any chest pain right now? Your heart rate's just kind of elevated. And
Hi.
I would just try
Vicky?
to relax and maybe.
What?
Chris and 3 other people just came in and they found a heart for me.
What?
I'm having surgery first thing in the morning.
What? Are you kidding me?
Yes, and my heart rate is at like 160 beats a minute right now.
Are you kidding me?
No, I swear to God.
I told you. No, I told you. Oh my God. Well, now what do I do?
I don't know. Maybe come back
I'm
here.
on the highway.
Well, come back.
Okay.
But I gotta call my parents.
Yes, goodbye.
Bye.
Yeah, so what you didn't see there is that my wife had been at the hospital with me all day long, and at around 7:20, she left to go home because our boys were at home, and they hadn't seen her all day. And she drove home, and at 7:45, they came in to tell me. So that was the night. That was the news that changed my life, right? I was born in 1975 here in Kansas City with a very rare congenital heart defect called transposition of the great arteries. Doctors alerted my parents that I was going to have multiple surgeries throughout my life and probably wouldn't even make it past the age of 20 without a miracle. At 13 months old, my parents had done some research along with my doctor at the time and found a heart surgeon in Miami, Florida that was not only, was the only surgeon at the time that was fixing the problem. They weren't fixing it for good, but there was a procedure that allowed a person that was born with a heart like mine, very, very rare congenital heart defect, where your heart is hooked up backwards. They were able to cut a baffle so the blood could mix. When they left the hospital after that surgery, they knew that life would not be normal for me. However, I did live a fairly normal life, but with limited physical activities. I couldn't do sports. I couldn't run in PE class. I never ran the mile. I always walked it. I was the last one back in class. Because my heart was hooked up backwards. I did live a normal life. I went to college. I got married. I had 2 boys. They are 16 and 13, and luckily they were born with very strong hearts. But in 2008, everything changed. My normal life became a little bit more hectic after I had a small stroke. That was finally the sign that things had changed and maybe my heart was not as strong as it was. After the stroke, I was being seen by doctors more frequently. They were changing my medications almost monthly, and even installed a defibrillator for that just-in-case moment, in case my heart would stop. Between 2008 and 2016, I suffered 2 more small strokes, and my health began to rapidly decline. In the fall of 2016, I was so weak that I was unable to work full days, and I was coming home at noon, and I was getting in bed. I was not able to even go upstairs to say goodnight to my boys. I was very, very sick. In December of 2016, my cardiologist finally officially referred me for a heart transplant. We had talked about it since my first stroke in 2008, that this was going to happen. I don't know if the doctors told my parents at 13 months old or when I was born if that was going to happen, but my wife and I were with my cardiologist in 2008 after my first stroke, and he said, you know, with your heart defect, you are going to have a heart transplant at some point in time. And I asked him, I said, well, what does that look like? And he told me exactly what it looked like, and every single thing that he said was exactly right. In December of 2016, or in February of 2017, I was checked in to St. Luke's Hospital right here in Kansas City to do a full transplant workup. And what that workup is I get to do every medical test that you can think of to make sure that my body was healthy enough. I had to meet with a psychiatrist. I had to meet with all these different, for 6 days, there were probably over 100 people that walked into my room asking me stuff. Because they have to make sure that you're mentally and physically ready for a transplant. And they want to make sure that you have a support team at home too. After being sent home from my transplant workup and being put on the heart transplant waiting list, my health declined even more, and I had to report back to the hospital. My doctor in the clinic that day when I went in told me that I was too sick to go home and that she was going to admit me into the hospital and that I was not going home till I had a new heart. After waiting in the hospital for almost a month and being hooked up to all sorts of life-saving machines, my night nurse, Chris, who had become a friend of mine over the last month, on March 29th to tell me that they had found me a heart. The next day, on March 30th, the transplant team came to my room and wheeled me away. They started my transplant at 4:25 p.m., and they finished 9 hours later. And as you can see by me standing here, it was a success. A hero donor and my donor family had stepped forward to give me and my family a gift that would change our lives. Within 3 months, I was back to work. I could be active with my boys again, and I even bought a bicycle for the first time in my adult life. Before I left the hospital to come home 11 days after my transplant, my nurse, Jennifer, told me that I wasn't sick anymore. Even though I was born with a congenital heart defect and I had seen a congenital cardiologist my whole life and tests every single year, I was no longer sick. I was going home with a healthy heart. My donor gave me a healthy heart that was now hooked up the right way. I actually had a heart that was hooked up the right way, and all the blood was flowing the right way. I was going to be able to do things that I've never done before in my life. What a miracle. My doctors, nurses, and staff were so amazing. But the real hero in my story is my donor and my donor family who made the decision to give me the gift of life. Thank you. And like I say in the classroom, I am an open book, so there is no question that I will not answer. So please, if you have any questions, I am happy to answer them at this point. Don't be bashful.
Was there any point in time where you just felt completely hopeless, like you had no options?
No. and that was a good thing. I'm a very optimistic, positive person, and I'm very happy that I was born that way. You know, when you're born with a congenital heart defect and was told in 2008 that I was going to have a heart transplant, I had a long time to think about that. It didn't just creep up on me. So I just had a feeling on December 29th of 2016, when my doctor referred me for a heart transplant, to March 29th when I found out, which was pretty much 3 months, 100 different things happened that were the most amazing things that you could ever think about to get me to the point where I had that heart. So we always thought it would happen. We just didn't know when. Who else?
Before you had like your strokes and stuff,
Yeah.
Was that your heart issue that you think caused that, or was there like a history of strokes in your family before?
No, yeah, there were no histories of strokes. I was having atrial fibrillation, which is when your heart does strange things and beats certain ways to where blood clots can happen, and that's what happened with mine. So yeah. Good question. Who else?
Were you and your wife hesitant to have kids because of your disorder, or did you ever think about how that might affect them?
Great question. I've never been asked that. No, we were not. We had my first son, who's a junior in high school. He was born in January of 2006. My first stroke was in 2008, but that never crossed our minds. We wanted to have kids. The thing about when you're born with something like mine, I mean, you just have to live your life. You can't think about what's going to happen. And even after transplant, I can't sit here and think about what's going to happen. I just trust my doctors, and I trust that I'm going to be okay. Good question.
What were the emotions that went through your head after you got your heart, and like, what did you feel when you got like the initial news that you were going to get your heart?
Well, we were very, very excited. The emotions of being able to receive a transplant from somebody who is deceased, you have to step back, and although we were excited as a family, and I was extremely excited that I was most likely going to live, on the other side of that, you've got the donor family who's going, we're having the best day of our life, and they're having the worst day of their life. So you do have to think about that. But the emotions were very, very positive. As you can see, I was freaking out. What you also didn't see there was the nurses running in because my heart was beating so fast. Because I was excited. We had waited. You could say that I waited my whole life. I wasn't on the heart transplant list my whole life, but I almost was. But you know, I did wait about 6 weeks, but the emotions were just unexplainable. Yeah. I'm sorry.
What like health precautions did you have to take after like your transplant, and like what like medicine did you have to take, I guess?
Yeah.
Don't you have to take like anti-rejection medicine?
Very, very smart. Yes. Yes. So there are really no restrictions that I have now because my heart is hooked up the right way. I can do things that I want to do. They actually gave me a 3-ring binder when I left the hospital, and it says here's all the things that you can do in the first 4 weeks and 6 weeks and 8 weeks. But after really 8 weeks, I can do whatever I want to do. And as far as medications, yes, I'm on anti-rejection pills for the rest of my life. But I went from taking preventative type of heart meds that kept my heart pumping the right way to after transplant being able to take just anti-rejection pills. But the majority of my pills are like vitamins. Like I take calcium and vitamin D and that type of stuff. So I do have to take pills 3 times a day, but it's worth it. Anybody else? Yeah.
So as a parent, was it hard for you to try to explain to your kids why you couldn't do certain things with them and play sports with them?
Yeah. So because of my kids' ages, and because I was born with the defect, they knew that Daddy had a special heart, right? So we did have to explain it over time, but that also helped my family and my kids, the fact that we knew for so long that I was going to have a heart transplant. It really helped them understand what I was going through, and they are very happy that I have a new heart and now I can do more stuff. But yeah. Good question.
This will be our final question.
Final question, all right.
Did you feel different from the others?
What do you mean by that?
Like since you couldn't do as much as regular kids can?
Yeah. Yeah, so the unique thing about what I was born with is that I never knew what it was like to be normal. I didn't know what it was like to be able to run the mile in PE or play football or play basketball or anything like that. So the fact that I had a heart transplant and then at 41 years old was able to feel like what others felt for the first time was amazing. I mean, I can do things that I've never been able to do. My transplant was March 30th of 2017, so it's almost been 6 years. So I can do things that I've never been able to do. So, thank you, guys.
And now, liver transplant recipient Luke Harbur will announce the winning school.
What the heck is going on, everybody? My name is Luke Harbur. I'm a liver transplant recipient. My beautiful parents, Nate Harbur and Kim Harbur, are here. They're the founders of the beautiful organization that is Gift of Life. Now, I've got to tell all of you, I actually have a surprise that was put on me just this second. I am a professional beatboxer. I have been doing this for 17 years. And as my way of saying thank you to all of you, I'd like to do just a little bit of that before I announce. Is that okay? Before I announce the winner? Sweet, are we ready? So, a lot of people know me as Skippy, and today you're listening to music by Skippy. And cell phones are allowed for this part of the presentation. Aufgeht in, aufgeht drink, aufgeht sleep. Don't forget the beat. What a dandy old time. I always tell people it takes a lot of bravery to come up on the stage in front of a lot of people, so please give any of your representatives a round of applause. Okay, I'm here to announce your winner. I want to make sure I say it right. Boop-a-doop-a-doop-doo-doo. Okay, your winner today is the Olathe Advanced Technical School Roadrunners. You all get a $5 gift card to Quick Trip. Woo! Thank you very much.
Awesome, congratulations. We will have one final speaker today, and her story is incredibly moving. So I'm really excited to welcome up Michele Shanahan Demoss. She will share with you the emotional story of her daughter Blair becoming an organ donor at the age of 11. We will begin her presentation with a video.
Blair was biologically my only child, and she was 11 and a half years old. Just an amazing soul. Happy, always looking for something to do. Just a normal kid. Good days, bad days. We had just arrived back in town on the 4th of July and went over to our family's house, and Blair was playing and with her cousins and family, and it was a celebration. It was the 4th of July, and I was sitting in a chair as I'm sitting here, and just several feet in front of me, she was playing with a sparkler, and she fell when I rolled her. Basically, I caught her, and when I rolled her over, she was hemorrhaging from her neck. So I knew it was serious, and the emergency professionals were called, the first responders, and when we arrived at the Children's Hospital, we were told that she had been struck by a bullet. And she gave her heart to a boy. Her liver went to a mother of 3 children. She is 50 years old. The kidney and pancreas went to a grandfather, and her other kidney went to a boy that was entering college, and her lungs went to a little girl that had cystic fibrosis. So each organ she donated is helping somebody thrive in a part of life. 3.5 years later, not a week or a month go by that something positive doesn't happen, or I get a note or an email or some sort of correspondence how Blair has changed somebody's life. She has made a difference in so many ways because the project that she came up with the idea. We were a foster family, so she understood what it was like to help in somebody firsthand that didn't have. She was always caring. If somebody was sick, she would pray for them. So she was always aware of what was going on when things weren't right in their life. And as her mom, I knew that if I sat at a table like I'm sitting and I talked to Blair about organ donation, that I know her decision would be, yes, I want to do that. I moved forward because I'm still Blair's mom. Nothing about that has changed. It's just the absence of her physical presence. I feel like she's with me with everything I do, with every decision I make, every good thing that happens. I just have a unique closeness with the bond that she and I have and had here, that it's the right thing to do, to share her story, to encourage others, to educate them, and to continue and each day try to be a better person.
"11 years and 4 months ago, my beautiful 11-year-old daughter, and I'm very honored to be here. 10 years ago, I spoke for the first time for Gift of Life. Loving, giving, beautiful, caring, generous. Each of these words describe her. She would be 23 years old, and I can only imagine I used to dream then of her future, and often still find myself with a sense of wonder as the world continues on. Every parent has hard decisions when it comes to being a parent, but no parent, nobody, ever plans to make some of the decisions that I had to make. Most of you were just 5 or 6 years old in 2011. And I actually think of that often because my nephew is now your age. He is a sophomore here at Rockhurst High School. And he stood in front of me. He had been with us the weekend when this happened. So it changed my life, took Blair's life, and changed his and the many other friends and family that were with us that evening. Every moment we have opportunities to do the right thing, to a decision that 3 men made to use a gun 3 football fields away tragically took Blair's life. So I found myself with decisions. My decision wasn't easy, to donate Blair's organs. Surrounded by family, and then alone with my own thoughts, loving, caring, giving, generous. I knew that she would be the first one in line for me if I needed anything. And there is no doubt that she would have done anything for family, friends, teachers, and even a stranger. Remember, there is no such thing as a small act of kindness. Every act creates a ripple with no logical end. The reality is that we don't forget, move on, or have closure. But I honor, I remember, and I incorporate Blair into my life in a new way. Sharing memories have been a big part of my healing journey. Every one of us is going to leave a legacy of some kind. People are remembered for being loving, generous, caring, and courageous. Most people don't like to think about the end of their lives, but each day we are building something to leave behind. I wouldn't have chose this for Blair, but in her death, to give the gift of life was the right thing to do. She gave the gift of life to 5 people with 6 organs. I have met her heart recipient. He was a boy. I've met her liver recipient and her kidney recipient just before he graduated college. And I have had a relationship with all of them. She is missed and loved by so many. And so I encourage you to tell somebody today and every day that you love them, because tomorrow is not promised. To share your decision about being an organ donor. It's exciting to get your driver's license, exciting to move on and grow up, but just share your decision with your loved ones and your friends. And I thank you for this opportunity to share, Blair. And I wanted to share, Andrew talked about being optimistic, and I have always been a very optimistic, very happy person, and that is what allows me to continue to get up every day and persevere. And Luke's performance is big enough for me as a donor mother. That is the perfect example of the gift of life. And he shared it with all of us today. So I thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. Anybody have any questions? Maybe.
Do you have any other children?
I have 4 stepchildren. They're all adults, and the oldest and his wife have 2 daughters. McKenna is 8 and Paisley is 2, and I am grandma. So even in the darkest things, some of the things that I never thought, some of the bridges I thought I would never get across, I am crossing them and enjoying them, and it doesn't take away the tears or the pain. I still miss her, and I know the decision was right in the midst of tragedy. It was goodness and grace. So.
How do you encourage students to have those conversations with their parents?
Yeah. I found that I had a very unique relationship with Blair. I mean, you've heard the saying, mini-me, she was my world. And I listened, and I was opened, and I encouraged. And that's why I say somebody that you love. I mean, it may not be your mom and dad, but, the table, in the car, get them when they're brushing their teeth. Just ask them. Ask them, do you know about organ, tissue, and eye donation? And you may be surprised what they tell you. I have been surprised over the years having those conversations with my family, with my own father. Unfortunately, my mother passed away 6 weeks before I had Blair, unexpectedly as well. So, it's, I think, an athletic slogan, just do it. I mean, there's no time like now. You don't want to just wait. I would say just do it. Just ask or write him a note. So, anybody else? I got trifocals. It's hard for me to see. Go ahead.
Whenever this happened, did you ever question your decision for this? Was there any part of you that was against it?
I said today, it's been 10 years ago, I shared Blair's story, and you can see even then, I think it said I was, and it just happened 3 years ago. Uniquely, I have not dealt with a lot of anger or negativity. I have grieved outwardly and openly. And I would not say questioned. Probably the only thing I ever questioned was how I ever left the hospital and left her there and I wasn't fully aware, because as though a tragedy just happened, it happened to me as well. So I was in a state of shock. So that life then, I just had a natural anesthesia about myself, and as the years have continued on, I have woken more and I feel more, but I don't question that. I have learned more about it. So I think in a couple years after, I wanted a specific timeline of how everything happened. That was really the only thing I questioned. I wanted to know a timeline. And it's a very interesting timeline. It's fascinating. So, yeah. Anybody else? How have I learned to cope with it? I have an amazing husband, and I have amazing family and friends. And I shared a little while ago that our first granddaughter, she was 2 pounds, 12 ounces, and they asked if I would be her caretaker. I don't even know then how that decision was made in 2014, but I say she saved my life. I mean, I just realized, just like all of you, in the age you are, you have so much, and I'm still Blair's mom. She didn't change. She's still Blair. I'm still her mom. And every time I look at myself in the mirror, I know that I'm her mom, and I still live and hold myself to that same expectation, as though she can see me as though she is right next to me. So that is how I do it. Sometimes I gotta trick myself, even with the sweater, because 10 years ago, I don't think I cried a lot when I spoke, and people thought that was not normal. But so yeah, so I know there's one up here.
Yeah, so obviously Blair saved lives and helped families of the donors, I mean, as people who received the transplant. Do you think it also helped you in coping, knowing that Blair had saved those people?
I wouldn't say in the beginning, but again, there's a time frame for me to know. And I met her heart recipient. You can actually watch the video. It's on the internet. I met her heart recipient live in New York, and the same thing. I just knew. And there's for me, there was an uncanny familiarness with the people that I've met. I mean, and to have those people check in or their family. So, it's a gift. So think how you feel when you get a gift. I was given the gift to share the biggest gift anybody can give. It's not an easy decision. I mean, I'm sure many times in my mind did I do the right thing, and listening to the transplant surgeon, I've met numerous transplant surgeons in the past 10, 11 years, and extraordinary. I mean, extraordinary. You guys good? All right, safe travels home. Thank you very much.